Arise, giving perfect praises to the great God of the universe, affectionately known to the Moorish Americans as Allah. Allah is the author, creator, the governor of the worlds, the almighty, eternal, and incomprehensible. All praises are due to Allah. I extend the highest of honors to his holy and divine Prophet Noble Drew Ali, the founder of the Moorish Science Temple of America. I extend high honors to his forerunner, the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, the founder of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, who did indeed warn and stir up the nations. I extend high honors to the American flag, also known as parts of the Moorish flag, the red flag with the five-pointed green star in the center. These 5 points represent love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. These are the 5 highest principles known to man. I extend high honors to the American flag, also known as the Stars and Stripes. This flag exists as a constant reminder that the European nations owe you, the Moors, with compound interest. I extend high honors to the noble Sheikh staff, the acting and vanguard staff will keep the peace, and giving honors to you, the Ills and Bays, for without you there is no Moorish movement. Islam? How's everyone on this holy day? It's good to see your smiling faces. It's always good to be in the presence of your people trying to reason together. Islam? All right. This evening, before we get into our ultimate measures and the other measures and demonstrations that our speakers will be going into, I'd like to lay a little groundwork relative to what the Moorish Science Temple of America is, who Prophet Noble Drew Ali is, what is our purpose, why do we gather, why are we in these white robes today, why am I in this fez, why is the sister in the turban, so on and so forth. So we'll get into some of this, if it pleases the great God of the universe. What I'll be drawing from is a text known as Moorish literature. This is it right here. This is not the one you have here, so if you can in spirit, just follow along. This is in an article entitled Moorish Leaders' Historical Message to America. And this is in all the articles that are in this Moorish literature pamphlet are extracted from the newspaper that was once known as the Moorish Guide newspaper, which existed back in 1928 during the time of our founder, Prophet Noble Drew Ali. The paper came out every Friday, and the newspaper, what it did was it gave people who were interested in our movement kind of like a guidance as far as the direction of the movement, different things we were planning politically, so on and so forth. All right, but this article right here, it does a good foundational work. Again, Moorish Leaders' Historical Message to America. It reads: in connection with the aims, objects, rules, and regulations of the Moorish Science Temple of America, I deem it proper to submit to you a brief statement of our organization covering its inception, rise, and progress, and of the Mohammedan religion, which I hope will be satisfactory to you and be the means of causing you at all times to adhere to the principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice in your relations with mankind in general. I further most anxiously hope this brief statement will help you to more clearly see the duty of at all times upholding those fundamental principles which are desired for our civilization of our posterity, such as obedience to law, respect, and loyalty to government, tolerance, and unity. We organized as the Moorish Temple of Science in the year 1925 and were legally incorporated as a civic organization under the laws of the state of Illinois, November 29th, 1926. The name Moorish Temple of Science was changed to Moorish Science Temple of America, May 1928, in accordance with the legal requirements of the Secretary of State of Illinois. The object of our organization is to help in the great program of uplifting fallen humanity and teach those things necessary to make our members better citizens. A national organization with a Rotarian complexion as it relates to branch temples became obvious with increasing number of inquiries from men and women in different sections of the country concerning the purpose of the organization. There are branch temples in 15 different states at this time. There are much more now because this was 1928. It says, since the work of the Moorish Science Temple of America was largely religious, the organization has been legally changed to a religious corporation, and an affidavit to this effect has been properly filed in the Cook County Recorder's Office of Illinois. Inspired by the lofty teachings of the Quran, we have it as the revealed word of God Allah. We shall foster the principles of its teachings amongst our members. This is our religious privilege as American citizens under the laws of one of the greatest documents of all time, the American Constitution. The Mohammedan religion is the least appreciated and probably most misunderstood of the world's great religions. This is especially true in our Western world. Try to understand what Mohammedanism means part south. What Mohammedanism stands for and some of the things it has contributed to the world. Muhammad was the founder of the Mohammedan religion. It originated 13 centuries ago on the Arabian Peninsula, where the streams of commerce and culture met and mingled in the Middle Ages, where the markets of exchange were stationed for the treasures of India and the products of the Mediterranean coast. There, this religion was established in the unprecedented short period of 20 years, and unlike many other religions, without the aid of any royal patronage and support. Buddhism had its Ashoka, Judaism had its Joshua, Christianity had its Constantine, but Mohammedanism had no person of royal rank and power to assist in its establishment and spread. Let me pause there. The reason why Prophet Noble Drew Ali is going in and explaining the Mohammedan religion and Islam and why he's reintroducing Islam back to our people in this country for another time is the fact that, you know, if you ask a lot of our people, well, from whence did you come? Where are you from? Where are our ancestors from? You know, you get numerous answers. You may get anything from, well, we were descendants of slaves who were brought in from Africa. It's okay. Well, what portion of Africa did our ancestors come? Or what do the historians tell us as far as the portion of the continent of Africa that we come from? They say, oh, he's West Africa. Okay. Well, name some of the kingdoms that were in West Africa. Can anybody name some kingdoms in West Africa? What we have?
Tunis, Algiers.
Well, that's northern. But if we come down to the western side, we have what? Mali, Ghana, Songhai, Niger. Modern day Nigeria, so on and so forth.
Yeah, it got a lot of Cameroon.
Absolutely. And right.
Ethiopia's on the other side.
Absolutely, that'd be northeast.
Yeah.
And the reason, you know, why, you know, you have to, why I said modern day is because Africa as we know it, and the countries that we go to a map today and look at where these countries are, the property boundaries that divide country to country was established, you know, in the present day in 1885 by the European nations under something known as the Berlin Conference, right? In 1885, the Europeans got together and along the lines of their colonial interests, all right, they got together and said, well, okay, well, you know, we'll agree that our border is here, right? And another one said, okay, we can agree to that. We'll agree to set the border up here, and they agreed to, you know, to live according to that, function according to that. So when the French occupied Morocco, right, and, you know, you have, let's say, Algeria, you know what I'm saying, who was, I think was Italy, am I mistaken? Algeria? It's either France or Italy. Point is that the European nations got together and agreed, but it had nothing to do with the indigenous inhabitants of the land, right? So what we're calling, you know, Algeria today, what we're calling Morocco today, what we're calling Ghana today has nothing to do with what our forefathers called it. Right? If you go back in the ancient times, these were ruled by, you know, this was, especially in Western Africa, was ruled by an empire. And that empire was known as the Moorish Empire. Inside of the Moorish Empire, you had all those various different nations, all of them were governed by the Sultan of Morocco. But Mali, Songhai, Janneh, all these various different places benefited from the protection that the Moors had established in northern and, you know, and northwestern Africa. The Europeans, once they pushed the Romans out, couldn't get back in. Right? And that was all governed under an Islamic, you know, empire. Now, one thing about the Islamic empire at that time, what you'll find is that, you know, our forefathers' treatment of what we call Islam demonstrated a tolerance of all religions, right? So you could be Christian under the Moorish Empire and no problem, you'd be safe, right? You wouldn't be persecuted because of your religion, right? You wouldn't be enslaved because of your religion, so on and so forth, right? You know, and, you know, these are the things that we don't understand, and we don't realize that Islam is not foreign to us, right? If you go back to the period of the 1700s, you know, right in that period of time, we had a strong Islamic empire in Western Africa. You know, it was strong in the way of going down to the point of where we had to execute treaties with the European nations and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, is that this is not new to us, right? So everything relative to our culture, our names, you know, even the average one of our people, well, would you consider yourself to be free? I say, yeah, I'm free. Okay. What's your name? You know, my name is William Jones. Okay. What is the origin of the last name Jones? Does it come from one of the African empires that we claim? And we'd say, no, it's England. Okay, well, are you English? You speak it, but are you English? See, speaking a language doesn't make you that thing. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay, so I speak English currently, but I'm not from English. I'm not from England. I picked up English from colonization. All right, I was born with an English name because that was put on our forefathers, and that the connection back to our empires was lost. So our people picked up whatever their colonizer's culture was, and they lived according to that. All right. So what Noble Drew Ali is doing is reintroducing us to some aspects of our culture, namely the Moorish. All right. Moving on, it says, today, this religion is acknowledged by nearly 250 million souls and extends over an area equal to 1/3 of the globe. From Arabia, it spread eastward over Persia, Turkestan, Afghanistan, westward across Syria, Asia Minor, Turkey, southwards to Africa, covering more than half of that continent. It found its way to India and beyond, to the islands of Sumatra, Java, and Borneo. To the early representatives of this faith, the world's debt is incalculably great, for it was they who transmitted the treasures of Greek literature from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance. They who originated the graceful forms of which the Taj Mahal and the Alhambra are the most famous examples. It was they who contributed to the sciences of algebra and chemistry, astronomy, and medicine. They who dotted the Saracen Empire with universities and who built at Baghdad and Cairo the most renowned universities of the world. If I were to pause and ask, those guys, I like to interact. I'm not a preacher by far, so I like a little interaction. If I were to ask, to your knowledge, what are the oldest universities on earth? Name like two, if you can name.
Harvard.
Okay. What else? Another? Princeton. Okay. Happen to know when Harvard was founded?
I think it's the 18. I can Google it.
Please, if you don't mind. Okay. Name some other universities that are considered old. Anyone else?
Fez.
Say again.
Fez.
You're going another bag. But yes, exactly. I'll get to that in a minute. Brown. Okay. All right. And I'll wait for our sister to get the date right there. The reason why I'm doing this is because, we have a certain mentality in terms of how we calculate time and what we consider to be ancient, right? What was what was ancient to the Europeans is not ancient to us, okay? As the sister's looking, my wife mentioned the University of Fez, okay? The University of Fez is actually located in Morocco, all right? And you have your date?
Let me see. Not yet.
Okay, all right. The two oldest universities actually are the University of Fez in Morocco, right? It's actually called University of Qarawiyyin. That's, it's about 1,300 years old. It's been there for 1,300 years. Yes.
It says established in 1636.
Okay, 1636. Thank you. But in Morocco, as I'm stating, the University of Fez has been there for 1,300 years, and the University of El Azhar in Egypt has been there approximately the same amount of time, all right? Why is it that we don't even know about these universities, but they're the oldest ones on earth? And the reason is because they happen to be situated in a landmass called Africa, and certain people don't want you to know this. I hate to sound conspiratorial, right? But I can't help but to notice the fact, okay? Anybody ever heard of Oxford University? You've heard this in England, right?
Right.
How did Oxford University get founded? Anybody know? Oxford University was actually founded after the year 1492, all right? What do we know 1492 for? Absolutely. What they say he did what? Discovered. Very interesting word, discovered. We can get to that in a second. Very interesting. Discovering something with people already there, but all right. But there's another function of that word that we're not aware of. And has anyone ever heard of the doctrine of discovery? You heard of this? No? The doctrine of discovery was a series of documents put out by the Catholic Church, which sanctioned the European nations to go forth and enslave our forefathers. Okay? So it was actually the Pope, who they call the Bishop of Rome, that gave the permission to the kings of England and France and Portugal and Spain to go forth and launch this thing of the enslavement of our forefathers. And in the documents, when you read them, for those taking notes, feel free to write some of this stuff down. I don't want you to believe me, I want you to research it. There's something called Inter Caetera, which is INTERCATERA, Inter Caetera. There's another one called Romanus Pontifex, which is like the word Roman with US on the end, Pontifex, PONTIFEX, and another one called Dum Diversas, DUMDIVERSAS. Yes. Which one are you at?
The second one,
Okay, I'll just take it from the top. Inter Caetera, I-N-T-E-R, Caetera, C-A-T-E-R-A. The next is Romanus Pontifex, which is like Roman with U-S on the end. Pontifex, P-O-N-T-I-F-E-X. And the next is Dum Diversas, D-U-M, and Diversas, D-I-V-E-R-S-A-S. In each one of these documents, the Pope actually tells, and why is the Pope telling the kings of Europe anything? What authority did the Pope have over the European nations? Does anybody know? Yes, sir.
Well, and I want to say the Middle Ages. Well, it was an empire called Byzantine. 1453. It was taken down, but from like I want to say like, don't quote me on this, but somewhere around like 1099 or something.
Okay.
1092 or something. AD. What it was is the Roman nations were, every time they would conquer a different nation of people, they would nationalize the people, and the people would still keep their identity, like you were saying earlier, and still worship under their God. But every time they would leave, the people would rebel against Rome, like against Rome. And so what they did was this guy named Constantine the Great, right, that they called the Great. He came with a what was like the theocracy, I believe,
Exactly.
which was everybody that was in the Roman nation, now they under him, and he telling everybody he like the God, and I mean he like the Pope and the President at the same time. So like his rule was just straight divine. So then what happened was like they got into a war with against his land, because they were trying to eradicate his land. But even in the course of that, what you were saying was true too, because the church was trying to take over England and everybody, like trying to take over the kings and all the property in the name of the church. And so, like, long story short is when they got kicked out of Istanbul, Turkey, which was Constantinople, the capital at that time of the Byzantine Empire. They got kicked out in 1453 when they lost the war, and so they were still searching for like ways to navigate from where they was at up in Europe, trade routes to like Asia Minor and stuff like that. Without, because they felt like if you kept going, you would fall off, and so they sent them out to try to find another trade route, like I think 4 or 5 times.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Christopher Columbus, and so. Which was a whole nother story.
Right.
Like you said, they ended up exiling and things at the end because he was too cruel.
Right.
When he was bringing slaves back.
Right.
But they were taking things over in the name of the church. Like people's land, they would come and send out like people like as ambassadors. Teach the people the language, and I mean,
Right.
to make friends and trade with people. And after they traded with them, they would convert them over to Christianity.
Forcibly.
You feel all their high-ranking people, and then take over the whole town pretty much.
Exactly.
In the name of God.
Right. So my brother just gave you all about 1,200 years worth of history. Right. Let me jump in there a little bit. So what happens is the Roman Empire at that time was so vast that they broke it down into 2 halves, and it was 2 seats of government of the Roman Empire. So you had Rome, all right, which was Roman Catholicism, and then you had Constantinople, which 325, that's Constantine and all that. So that's around like 325 AD when they organized that, right? Which later became Istanbul, Turkey, when Islam overthrew the Roman Empire. How you doing, Islam? From that section. But what happens is, like you said, they set up a theocracy. What is a theocracy? A theocracy is a form of government that uses religion as its core. Okay, versus let's say America, which is a republic, all right, where it's a secular government, right? In the ancient world, most governments were theocracies, all right. If the Islamic Empire that we're talking about was governed over by a caliph, and the caliph was the chief. He was similar to an emperor, all right, but he was ruling from the laws of the Quran and the imams who were scholars that interpreted law. All right, and that constituted the law that governed the people. All right, we come out of that. Why, even now, no matter what we find ourselves in, what school of thought, whatever, at our core, we're a spiritual people, right? So I don't care what you study, morality and virtue and principles and all that means something to you, right? because you are what your forefathers were without a doubt of contradiction. I can't change you from being your forefathers. I can just switch up your conscious mind a little bit in terms of what you're able to reference within a short amount of time. But in terms of your subconscious and who you really are, that's eternal. You're going to be that regardless. All right. So what happens is that the various different things that the Islamic / Moorish Empire was responsible for. How many people took algebra in high school? Took algebra, right? Anybody know the origin of algebra? What's the origin of that word, algebra? Anybody know? The word algebra comes from an Arabic word, which is al-jabr, which means the majestic, meaning that it's the science of trying to find the unknown, right? That's the essence of it, right? But it's something that we learn now in an English-speaking nation, right? But it's a word that finds its origin amongst Arabic-speaking peoples, all right? You know the numbers that we use now, the way we write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? What is that number system called? Anybody know? Right? It's called the Arabic numeral system. Why is it called that? And amongst our forefathers, the way we wrote numbers is exactly how we do right now. When the Europeans overthrew us, they just co-opted our whole system and utilized it. Okay? Anybody heard of alcohol before, right? Alcohol comes from the Arabic word alcohol, which means to block, right? Literally, like if someone is drinking alcohol, when they say spirits, right? It blocks the senses. You see what I'm saying? But that's something that comes from our forefathers, right? We have the word. Our people surely buy plenty of alcohol, but never learned that the concept of that. When our forefathers used that through the distilling process, we weren't using it to drink because alcohol is forbidden in Islam. We're not permitted to drink. It was used to cure wounds and so on and so forth, for surgery, right? If somebody got cut, if somebody got shot with an arrow, stabbed with a sword, you'd use that to clean the wound before you treated it, right? So, but why aren't we taught this, right? These words exist, but we're not taught where they come from. Why is that? Now, there are certain groups that exist that teach this in secrecy, right? And again, we're forbidden as Moorish Americans. I got you. We're forbidden as Moorish Americans to speak radical or agitate against any group. So that's not my intention. But there's, how many people have heard of a group called the Shriners? Heard of them? The actual name of the group is the Ancient Arabic Order of the Nobles of the Mystic Shrine. Right? There's another order known as the Ancient Egyptian Arabic Order of the Nobles of the Mystic Shrine, right? Arabic and Egypt. And to be a part of it, they wear fez like I do. But have you ever seen them in parades and stuff? Right? What's different of their fez and mine?
It has things on the fez.
Things on the fez, right? But does it have wording?
Sometimes.
Right. And what is the wording? You ever looked at some of the wording on the fezes? Say again? What you say?
Like the Kappa, Phi Beta.
Not the Shriners. The Shriners use specifically only Arabic and Egyptian names on their fez. So on there you might see Cairo.
You might see Muslim sons.
You might see Muslim. You might see El, Bey, B-Y, like our last names, that's Moors. You might see you might see Istanbul, right? You might see, so why are they naming, none of those places are in Europe, by the way, right? So why do we have a group of Europeans in a secret society who, when they greet each other at that level, they greet each other by saying, Assalamu alaikum, alaikum assalam. That's their pronunciation, right? May peace be upon you be peace. Well, that's our ancient way of greeting each other, right? Even as Hebrew Israelites, right? Some of our brothers, their cousins, family, right? They say shalom alaikum, right? Still peace be upon you. Shalom and salam is the same word, right? Because they were family to one another. Right? So, but again, why aren't we taught any of this? You see, these books exist. They have a whole library full of books, just all hidden history. Now you can get the stuff, right? But then 1800s, when they forbade our people to read, right? They were circulating a lot of knowledge amongst themselves, all right? About our culture. I have a 2-volume series over there, written in 1863, called Anacalypsis. For those taking notes, you might want to write that down. Anacalypsis, Anacalypsis. And Anacalypsis was written by a man named Godfrey Higgins, right? And Godfrey Higgins, who was actually an esquire or a lawyer, but he was also a linguist, a historian, so on and so forth. He was a part of a group called the Royal Society of Asiatics, which that's ironic because he was European. He wasn't Asiatic, but they were studying Asiatic histories. But in that book, they tell you that Buddha, Krishna, Jesus, Muhammad, all of them look like you in this room. Now this is written by a man from England, very pale skin with straight hair, right? But it was written during the time. Could our people read in 1863?
No.
So this is knowledge. They, Brother Raphael, could you lift one of those up there, all the way against the wall? They look like telephone books at the bottom. You mind handing me both? Gratitude, man. I just want y'all to see the amount of research they were doing about your culture that they didn't want you to read or study. Okay? Okay, this is 1863. Okay? Excuse the condition, it's been read to death. But it says, Anacalypsis, an attempt to draw aside the veil, the Saitic Isis, an inquiry into the origin of languages, nations, and religions by the late Godfrey Higgins. All right, part and stuff that was actually 1836. All right, and Godfrey Higgins, Esquire. All right, so on and so forth. And I'll just pass it around. Y'all can flip through that if you like.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Y'all can start on this. No, let me switch that. Let me give you the heavy one to the brothers. Right? And then y'all can switch if y'all want to. But the reality is, why is it that we're not taught this? Right? You ever notice like everybody knows your history except you?
True.
Have you come across that?
Yes.
Right? Like the Moors could tell you, maybe after the meeting, we'll, break bread, we have some food for y'all afterwards. We're sitting around talking, maybe some of the Moors can share with you their experience of like when we go out in public with our feathers, with our garments on, similar to what we wear today. We come across foreigners all the time, and we've had everything from them opening doors. I've had a grown man cry on me from India. He's like, I've not seen this in a long time. My grandfather had this. It's good to see you all back. Where have you been? I said, with the stroke of a pen, they made us disappear. You see? So, I got your mobile. So, you good? All right. So, what Noble Drew Ali's doing, and I know it's a lot of word, and a lot of history, and a lot of things, but I just want to provide context for what our prophet is saying. All right. Let me move on. He says, they who dotted the Saracen Empire with universities and who built at Baghdad and Cairo the most renowned universities of the world. Now, these are the ancient ones. You're talking like over 1,000 years ago. Universities, right? The University of Fez that we talked about, Qarawiyyin in Morocco. For those taking notes, write that down. It's the University of Qarawiyyin. Yes, sir. Qarawiyyin. Qarawiyyin. You can put in brackets next to it, or parentheses, Fez, University of Fez. And they called it the University of Fez because, how you send your children to school and they say your child has to wear a uniform to school. You've heard this? And there's a polo shirt, right? Khaki pants. You've seen this before? All right? Well, the uniform for the University of Fez was this headdress, right? So if you were a male and you went to the university, they would crown you with this, and then you take on the studies. And 1,300 years ago, you're studying algebra, you're studying chemistry, right? You're studying astronomy. Has anybody ever studied astronomy? Like the stars and stuff? What predominant language of the names of the stars do we have? Like, what kind of names are you finding amongst the stars out there?
Constantine.
Latin.
Say again? Some Latin, but predominantly what? Who spoke what? That's ancient. More like in the modern day. Like if I was to go and look up the constellations now, right? So when you have like 88 fixed stars, most of those have Arabic names. Most of them. Why do they have Arabic names? Because it was your forefathers that named the stars. Why don't we know that? And even the Latin, right? It was your forefathers that taught the Romans Latin. Yeah. Some of our Moorish American forefathers call Latin Moorish, call it Moorish Latin. Right? I know this sounds far out. No, it sounds far out, right? But let me ask you this. Have you ever heard the phrase, sometimes truth can be stranger than fiction? You've heard this? All right? And see, once you know who you are, now you get a chance to change the narrative, right? You get out of this thing of our history starts with slavery, right? Our children, they put them in school, right? Well, we put them in school, but then they teach them Black History Month, right? Who do we learn about during Black History Month? Say again? Okay, who else?
Malcolm X.
Malcolm X, Frederick. And if that's a good school now, not all of them teach about Malcolm. That's throw up some stuff. But okay, Malcolm. Who else? Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman. Right, Frederick Douglass. Why are they giving you those people? What era of time are they teaching you in?
Slavery.
From slavery to now. That's all you get, right? So that means, because it's called Black history, right? The origin, what's the origin of the word black as applied to people? Yeah, but what's the origin? Like, how did that get applied to people? Keep it short more, because I know you got volumes. Islam.
Like in citizenship. Social class, like in the social caste system. What we were talking about last week, Johann Friedrich Blumenbach.
Who, if you go into the nation of people that started that, what was the earliest European group that started dealing with slavery? Anybody know?
The Slavic race.
No, not that were slaves, but who started enslaving. European group. The Portuguese, right? Now, Portugal, where does Portugal sit in Europe? What is it? What country does it basically sit inside of? Anybody know? Spain, right? Now, when did Spain become known as Spain? Does anybody know? It was after 1492, okay? So from 711, what happened in the year 711 to that region?
The Moors, that's when they took them over, when they went and conquered them and pushed the Europeans out of there, and they like civilized them. That's why they said like, oh, thank heaven, 711.
Right.
Because they went and gave them running water.
So
Gave them soap, like taught how to bathe, and they took them out of what was called the medieval time, where they was like medieval, like
Right.
middle age,
that's a good one.
kind of like civilized the Europeans.
Absolutely. And see, but again, that, prior to 1492, there was no France. Now this is European history. They'll tell you this. There was no France. France was known as Gaul at that point. The Gauls were a tribe. They were a barbaric tribe, right? Again, they're not my language because we're not radical speakers. They'll tell you that the Gauls were radical, were a barbaric people. The inside of, what we presently call Spain, history calls that history calls that the Iberian Peninsula, right? That's what history calls it. When the Moors took it over, we called it Andalusia. The reason why we call it Andalusia, the word Andalus in Arabic is the word Vandal. Right? And the reason why it's the word Vandal, the barbaric tribe of Europeans that were there were called the Vandals. Now, just to give you an inkling into their mind state, right? What does it mean in the modern day to vandalize something?
Tear it up.
Tear it up. Now, you have a tribe named that. How do you think they were running around the land? So I have a book. Again, I don't want you to believe anything I'm saying. I'm into getting out people to read. I have a book entitled A Vanished World. For those taking notes, feel free to write it down. Amazon has it. A Vanished World, Medieval Spain's Golden Age of Enlightenment. And it's written by Chris Lowney. And they give you all the history here. In this book, they tell you about a period of time when the Moors got to a certain section of the Iberian Peninsula, which you call Spain, and there was another barbaric tribe there called the Navarres, right? As the Navarres, basically, they ate meat raw. Right? So they wouldn't even kill the animal and cook it before they ate it. They would just jump on an animal and start biting on it, right? And you have eyewitness accounts from that time writing down what they saw. This is your Moorish forefathers. Like, y'all not gonna believe this, and start writing down what they were seeing, right? So we come in like, no. First of all, because Islamically, right? Does anybody know how do you slaughter an animal in Islam?
Pray.
You pray over it, right? Has anyone seen an animal slaughtered in a halal fashion? You seen it? When it's done, does the animal seem to be freaking out?
No.
We stroke the animal, calm it. And this is if you eat meat, because as Moorish Americans, most of us are vegan, right? But if you do eat meat, there's a process to that, right? You calm the animal, right? You say a prayer over it. You lay his head back. You take a really sharp blade and go from ear to ear, but it has to be swift. The animal can't suffer, any of that kind of stuff. Has anyone ever seen video of a slaughterhouse in America? Have you seen some of this stuff? If you're not vegan, it make you want to go vegan. They have a stall, like especially for like cows, and the cow comes in the stall, and I haven't forgotten you have a question. You still remember your question? Okay. The cow comes in the stall, and there's a huge blade underneath. And when it comes in, there's a thing that locks his head you know what I'm saying, in it. So it starts freaking out automatically because the stall's, you know, narrow, and this thing locks around the neck, and the blade just comes and hits it like this, and then they open the wood things up, and it's just kicking and screaming, and the adrenaline that's pumped through the blood at that point goes through the meat, and you eat that. And wonder why your baby can't sit still talking about he got ADD. He ain't got ADD. It's that meat you gave him and the way it was killed, right? Because you're not honoring your forefathers of the way we did stuff. We trying to be everybody else, and it's harming us. All right? Y'all okay? Brother Quilla, you had a question.
Yeah, I was asking you, I wanted to ask you about you said the alcohol that was used for healing.
Yes.
The same alcohol that's used in the drinking.
Certain ones. Now, I'm not saying you can take some Hennessy and put on I'm not saying that. But don't try that. You might get an infection messing with that. But believe it or not, certain, ironically, there's a particular alcohol called gin. Right, it's clear, right? And you can utilize that, you know what I'm saying, to heal wounds and so on and so forth, right? But even the word jinn, what they spell G-I-N, right? In Arabic is J-I-N, right? And jinn is a lesser spirit, right? You have angels and then you have ones that were created after that. They're called the jinn. From the residual spiritual energy that was left over after the angels created, you had the jinn. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, I always thought that was funny when they going past liquor stores, it says spirits on the store. You go in and buy some spirits, you know, and then you see how they act when they drink that stuff. No judgment, right? Moving forward, it says, anybody have any questions at this point? Okay. It says, during those centuries of ecclesiastical despotism, when the Christian church suppressed all intellectual activities, save those that were theological, causing the talent that reproduces to supplant the genius that creates, Mohammedans did all in their power to encourage and stimulate research in every branch of human inquiry, all right? And let me square that really quick. In the ancient world, when you're talking about the Christian church, that was two things, and it had nothing to do with how we were raised here in America. That had nothing to do with the Baptists and Pentecost, had nothing to do with that. This was before all of that, right? The two things that it dealt with was the Roman Catholic Church, right? And be clear that they put their nationality on their religion, right? So it's not just the Catholic, it's the Roman Catholic Church. So let's be clear on that. And then you have the Byzantine tradition, which is B-Y-Z-A-N-T-I-N-E. And the Byzantines were actually Greek Orthodox, okay? They're separate. They have their own line of popes, different than their pope presently is not Pope Francis. They have a separate pope. Just like how many people have heard of the Coptic Christians in Egypt? You've heard of them? Right? Here's how they came about. Jesus had 12 disciples. Jesus gets crucified, resurrected, moves on. His disciples got hunted down. You ever researched the story of what happened to his disciples? Well, they got hunted down. The only one that didn't get killed off was John, son of Zebedee, and he was put on house arrest on the Isle of Patmos. But the rest of his disciples were all hunted down and murdered tragically. You know, some of them were crucified upside down, some of them were dismembered, so on and so forth. One of his disciples named Mark, right? Mark left the Palestine area, came into Egypt, settled for a while, and came down and settled into Ethiopia, all right? There they established a church known as the Coptic Christian Church. The word Coptic, C-O-P-T-I-C, Islam family, the word Coptic comes from the Arabic word kupti, which means center, meaning that that's the oldest church, right? And when you research the images of the Ethiopian, Orthodox Church or the Coptic Christian Church, their pictures, because they have hieroglyphics of Jesus and Mary and the angels and everything, their pictures look just like you. They got afros, locks, melanin, the whole nine, right? And that's an older version, but where the pictures come from that my grandmom had in her Bible, right? That comes from the Sistine Chapel of Michelangelo. The Romans did that, right? Because again, just like anybody else, has anybody ever been to let's say a Chinese restaurant and, they might be Christian and they have a cross on the wall? Have you seen this? Okay. And Jesus is actually on the cross. Have you actually looked at Jesus' face on that cross in that Chinese restaurant? They make Jesus' eyes look like theirs. See, we're the only people that pick up somebody else's image and worship it. And that's because of the damage that was done. Nobody else on earth will worship another image, right? Because psychologically, what does that do to your children, right? Because if the God don't look like my mama, right, I'm gonna believe that is God, or that image is God, right? And I begin to defer to the people that look like that as God, all right? And we'll get into some of that a little bit later, all right? So I just wanted to touch on that, and I wanted to demonstrate when he says ecclesiastical despotism, right? What that's dealing with is that during the time when the medieval period, the only people that could read during that period was the Pope and his priests. Kings of Europe at that time couldn't read. If they had to sign their name, they put an X. That's where that comes from. Islam. If you watch a lot of these shows, they make a lot of these movies. Anybody seen Spartacus? You seen this? Write it down. They show you the state they were in at that time. There's another one. HBO had a series called Rome. Right? You can probably catch some of that on YouTube. Just write down Rome HBO on there, and it'll come up. And they don't lie to you about who they are and how they were living. What's the other one? Gladiator. Y'all seen Gladiator? Right? And you saw that you had an emperor, right? But you also had barbaric European. They show you this. I didn't direct a movie, right? Somebody sat down and got historical documents together and said to accurately depict what went on in that day and time, we got to do it like this, right? So if he tells you that's his history, who are you to say it's not? Make sense? All right. Moving on. Again, any questions?
Who did you say could read during medieval times?
Only the Pope and his priests. So here's how the pictures came about. The pictures come about. The Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo was contracted by the Pope to go and on all of the walls, and especially on the ceilings. Anybody ever been into a cathedral before? A Catholic church? Those big vaulted ceilings. So it's when you walk in, it's almost awe-inspiring. Like, wow, look at this! Like somebody actually built this. But then if the paintings, if you can't read, and there's pictures on the ceiling, you look up and you ask the priest, well, who's that? Well, that's God, and that's God creating Adam. Right? Like, wow. So you're already looking up, right? And it's the echoes and the Catholic music. You know how it goes. The whole experience, right? And that's how they learned the Bible, because they couldn't read it. Right? Michelangelo ended up going blind. Y'all know how? He was laying on his back painting that stuff, and the paint was dripping in his eyes. Right? There's other stories to that, but I don't want to offend anybody totally there. Islam what? All right? So this is what I'm saying. Like, why? In terms of context, I'm not doing this to spew hatred, and I hope you're not perceiving it from a hateful place. It's not coming. This is just history, right? But what I'm saying is that why is it that we aren't taught these things? And I think that's both mean and unjust, right? To have a K through 12 system where you're teaching children everything under the sun, but you're not teaching them who they are or their relevance to the culture that they're in. You have a contribution here in America, right? Can anybody tell me about some of the writers of the U.S. Constitution? I know I'm making a jump, but we live under the Constitution, right? Yes, sir. Islam.
Brother that's on the back of the $2 bill.
What's his name, my brother?
I forgot.
John Hanson.
John Hanson.
John Hanson, yes, sir. Right, John Hanson. And under the Continental Congress, George Washington wasn't the first president per se. Y'all know this, right?
They say John Hanson was.
Right, because George Washington was the first president under the 1789 Constitution, but the Constitution that preceded that was the Articles of Confederation. And under that, the presidents, their terms were 1 year, right? The first president of that was John Hanson, and he looked like you. Why aren't we told this? Why aren't we told that he was the one that was responsible for keeping the Union together? When everybody else got scared, thought they was going to get beheaded by the King of England, right? He put his own money up, said, no, we got to do this, right? Because it's unjust how he's doing us, and reminded the people of the abuses, right? That's right here in America, but we don't know, we're not taught that. When it comes to civics and American history, right? You're not taught, real quick, anybody seen the U.S. Capitol building before? You seen this? Where Congress and Senate meets, right? So you see it's a dome, right? But you see on the top it's a statue. You ever seen a statue? What's that statue of? Anybody seen it? It's a Native American on the top, right? Why do they put a Native American on top of the U.S. Capitol? And that the U.S. Capitol building is the building where they make laws. Why would they put a Native American on the top of that, right? Well, you could say, well, they did conquer the land and slaughter all of, you could say that, right? But that's not it. They put it on the law building because that's where they learned law, right? Because the laws that govern this existed before the Europeans got here, right? You've seen this flag before, and on top of it, sometimes they'll have, I didn't mean to just drop it like that. On the top of it, they'll have an eagle. You've seen this? Well, you had what was known as the Law of the Great Peace, right? Which was the original Constitution here, right? The Law of the Great Peace actually starts off, we the people. It's the same preamble that you have here. Great Peace, or some would say the Great Law of Peace, right? Which, like I said, the Hebrews and the Muslims both, one was salam, the other was shalom, both meant peace, right? And the Constitution that ran this land before the Europeans got here was called the Great Law of Peace, right? But what happens is the Europeans got here into a system that was already, there were nations already set up here, right? How many people think Atlanta is a new city? How many people think Detroit is a new city? Memphis, Tallahassee, right? Tallahassee, do you know what that word? Tallahassee is Arabic. You know what it means? Allah will come in the future. How many people that live in Tallahassee know that?
I didn't know that. I just moved from there.
Oh, wow. Right? How many people have seen the Cherokee? You've seen paintings of the Cherokee? So there was a Cherokee chief named Sequoyah, right? Brother Sequoyah, anybody seen how he's dressed? Brother Lance, give him a picture of the prophet. The top one. The last known Cherokee chief, you gotta lift it up, there you go. Last known Cherokee chief, his name was Ramadan Ibn Wati, right, which is an Arabic name. But Sequoyah was dressed just like, this is Prophet Noble Drew Ali, for those who've never met him before, right? This is the brother that came to you to teach you all about your history and your flag and all the stuff I'm talking about tonight. This is him. But Sequoyah, the Native American, the Cherokee chief, was dressed just like this. Turban, feather, sash, right? Why is a Native American chief dressed like this, right? I thought Native Americans were pretty much naked and just had loincloths on. Here you go, my brother, put that back. All right? The loincloth is just like an apron, all right? That's what they show us, but they're not showing us that we walked around America like this when the Europeans got here. In Columbus, my brother right here mentioned Columbus. Columbus had a set of diaries. They call them Columbus's Chronicles, right? When you read Columbus's Chronicles, he says, when the ship landed, they got off in Hispaniola, which is modern day Cuba, right? He said when they got off the boat, they heard like a voice singing, and he realized, because remember, he just left Spain, right? He just left where it was a bunch of Muslims. The Muslims ruled Spain for 800 years, right? Mosques everywhere, prayer 5 times a day, so on and so forth, in that particular tradition, right? But when the boat landed in Hispaniola, modern day Cuba, the call to prayer was going off, just like it goes off in Spain, in Cuba, meaning there's Muslims already there, right? Trace it out on top of the mountain, there was a mosque on top of the mountain in Cuba that was built before they got here. Why aren't you told about that? Right? So you've been here, right? The constitutional aspect I brought up, right, was the fact that your forefathers were the ones that sat down and taught them what a republic was, right? Remember, you don't go from just living under, what is a monarchy? Anybody know? King. Or, what else? Give me another mode of government that uses a monarchy. Use your own traditions, because we didn't have kings. Emperor, still European tradition, but I got you though, yes.
Sultan.
Islam.
Islam, arise, giving all praise. Father God, Allah, and has divine six prophet of Drew Ali.
Islam, you recognize?
I was going to say the same thing.
Islam. Sultan.
Yes.
Let's use our traditions. Sultan, Caliph, Amir, Mansa. These are titles of our forefathers. But we don't know that. We know king and queen. You've heard this? We all kings and queens. No, we're not. Kings and queens come from Europe, England, and France. Well, England, France, and Germany, right? We had sultans and amir. Prophet Noble Drew Ali teaches us. What is the title given to our ruler in Morocco? Sultan. But notice he said our ruler, right? Because the whole thing is, and again, he also teaches, how did the prophet begin to uplift the Moorish Americans?
Teach them to be themselves.
And what does it mean to be yourself? You gotta ask yourself that. Who am I? I like to ask the question all the time. What's today? Friday. What's the origin of the word Friday? Freya, which comes from what land? Give somebody else a chance, bro. He wearing y'all out over here. Freya, F-R-E-Y-A. That's the origin of the word Friday. Where does that come from? Yes, sir. Norse, right? The Norse tradition, Vikings. Same place you get Thor. You know the movie Thor that everybody's watching through Marvel, right? Oh, that's Viking. Are you a Viking? Right? How about Wednesday? What's the origin of the word Wednesday? Wednesday is Woden's Day, W-O-D-E-N's Day, which is a Viking god. Are you Vikings once again? Right? You had to get directions to get here, right? So if you ask someone, what's the address over there? 394 Cleveland Avenue. Who named it Cleveland? Did your ancestors name it Cleveland? No, and if not, what was the name of the street before someone else named it that? Right? What's the origin? You're in the city of Atlanta, right? What's the original name for the city of Atlanta? Anyone know? Pakanahuili. P-A-K-A-N-H-U-I-L-I. You know what it means? Standing peach tree. You know what drove me crazy when I moved here from New Jersey? And I love Atlanta. I came here and never left. But how many peach tree streets there are? You ever took account of that? But why do they keep naming these streets Peachtree? Because it goes back to the original name of the city. Pakanahuili. Why don't we know that? I said Atlanta was ancient, but I didn't say the name was, right? But the name is actually not a place, but a woman actually. And her name was Atalanta. And that's all, if you research that, that's a whole story. Write that down, A-T-A-L-A-N-T-A. There's a statue of her downtown. A-T-A-L-A-N-T-A, Atalanta. You know where 5 Points is? You know the park where everybody, I knew them from out there playing chess and stuff. Not too far from 5 Points, right? You know that statue of the woman and she's holding a bird? You've seen that? That's Atalanta. They put it right in 5 Points. They put it right at the 5 Points. But why don't we know that? So my question would be, what do you know? And there's no shame in not knowing. The shame is not admitting it. The shame is perpetuating the lie. The shame is acting like you know something when you really don't, right? Like we have leaders, right, that have come before us and attempted to lead our people, correct? Did they teach us any of this?
No, sir.
Or at the end of it, did we still remain blacks and Negroes? Respect to all the great work that was done. It's a lot of great work. Matter of fact, had they not done that work, I wouldn't be able to stand here today. So I give honors to John Lewis, C.T. Vivian, Martin Luther King. Islam? Those are my forefathers. They're yours too, right? But it's certain things that wasn't their calling to give, so they couldn't give it. They were close. Dr. King was very close to Noble Drew Ali. Very close to what he brought. Why his message was on love, right? If you research what Noble Drew Ali brought in 1913, he stayed teaching us about love, right? Because he said one of the first things you learn in the Moorish Science Temple of America is 2 lessons you get. And everything that we learn is between those 2 lessons, right? One is learn to love instead of hate, and be yourself and no one else, right? And everything I taught you tonight is between those 2 things, right? Because one of our flaws is we like to be like other people, right? When other people fight hard to be themselves, right? Islamo.
I was going to say learn to love
Instead of hate, and to be yourself and no one else. Okay? Islam.
I wanted to ask a question
Sure.
about a couple of words that you said were different when it came to king and then when it came to sultan.
Yes.
I had been thinking, I had noticed that the crowns are different. So that usually what we use here as a king's and queen's crown is a European crown.
Tiaras and stuff like that in the Europe. Yeah, hilarious. I saw a brother walking through the airport. He had like an English crown on, tilted to the side. Brother, tilted to the side. And everybody's like, go ahead, king. And I'm just laughing. I'm like, well, he trying. He tried. I wouldn't take my fans off, but he go more. This is your real crown. But it's so much we don't know. And the things that we're taught, I got you more. The things that we're taught these things to prop up a particular power base, to maintain a particular status quo, right? To keep somebody else in power. Because if you were to be yourself and no one else, now all of a sudden certain images don't look good to you anymore, right? And you stop spending your money on that madness and put it back into your own community to build up infrastructure in your own community. All right? I put up a post on Facebook about 2-3 days ago. My wife and I, this is, during the day, this is a barbershop that we own. And, when we pull up in the mornings, man, a lot of times be trash all out there. And every day we have to go out and pick up trash, and this is our people to do this, trashing our own community, right? And like I said in the post, I couldn't help but notice that the stuff that was on the ground, chicken boxes, potato chip bags, weed bags, and some things I can't mention because there's a baby in the room. There's a direct correlation to the poison that's on the ground, because all that's like enriched and processed food and whatever. Because that stuff makes you think a certain way. right? Because what's the thought process behind eating some food and then throwing the trash out of the window in your own community? Do you see that in Buckhead? Do you see it in Alpharetta? Do you see it in on Buford Highway where the Asians and the Mexicans are? Do you see it over there? No. But it just happens to be that the people that don't have a nationality do that. But the people that do have nationalities take pride in where they're at. Why is that? Do you see where I'm going here? Right? There's something different that was done to you. And until that's fixed, we can't move forward. And we can't put it off another generation. I have grandchildren. My youngest grandson is 4. You know, I try to fill him up constantly without being pushy, right? Because you don't want to be preaching. That's a turn off too. But I try to put him around different things. So him seeing affairs is not odd, right? Him coming to the temple and seeing us pray like this is not odd. Because our forefathers prayed standing with their eyes open. Right? You better read your Bible. That's in there too. Right? And by the way, don't throw this book away. It's not what you think it is. Right? There's some science in this. But you just got to be taught how to read it. Right? I use the example all the time. Abraham Lincoln was a lawyer by trade and never went to law school. He learned law by reading the Bible. Right? There's something that they say Abraham Lincoln learned law in a longhouse. Anybody know anything about the ancient longhouses? You know, like my grandma lived in what they call a shotgun house. You know about shotgun houses? What's a shotgun house? Right, front door, you have the front door and you look straight through the back door. Like all the rooms off that one hallway. Well, that comes off the model of what they call a longhouse. The longhouse was also known as the priest's house, was amongst the Native American tribes. That's where you went to learn civilization. That's where you went to learn government and law and so on and so forth. And we know the first European that we allowed to study in our longhouses was a European named William Penn. And who was William Penn? The founder of Pennsylvania. Okay? And he was the one that came in and learned how to live under a republic as opposed to living under a monarchy. Why does any of this matter? It matters because when my sister right here first came in, we immediately got to start talking about politics, right?
Right.
Straight to it, politics, right? As we're talking, my thought process is a little different because I believe that anyone that we put in there has to have our interests at heart. You know, praise Allah for that sound. I'm letting you know, anytime we gather and you don't hear babies in the background, you're losing. Because the future is not present. So that's a blessing right there. So thank you, Sister Jalila Neal, for sounding off. Right? And we have another baby in the oven, so we're definitely winning. Thank you, Brother Jabari. And Sister Jackson, we're definitely winning. All right? The rest of y'all got to get on your job. Get married first, though. Right? Please get married first. Right? Do it like your forefather. But the reality of it is, Moses, that, you know, we're in a government that we don't even know that we helped to found. Right? The 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. What building sits at that address? Say again? No, sir.
White House.
The White House. Right? Your chief executive lives there. 45. Right? President Donald Trump currently. Right? It's called the White House. True? Why is it called the White House? In Morocco, there's a city in northern Morocco called Casablanca. What is Casablanca? Anybody habla español? White House. That city of Casablanca, which is really named Dar Beida, and Dar Beida in Arabic means the white abode, which is really the White House. Dar Beida is D-A-R and B-E-I, 2 separate words. D-A-R, and then the next word is B-E-I-D-A. Dar Beida. We need some more chairs, brothers. So Dar, D-A-R, and then B-E-I-D-A. Dar Beida. And Beida comes from the word Abiyad, which is A-B-Y-A-D. Abiyad. Abiyad in Arabic is this is Abiyad al-Kamis. This is a white shirt, right? Abiyad is white. Beida is like a conjugated form of Abiyad, right? But the name of that city existed before 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. This building was put there. Now, why did they name it there, and why did they put it at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue? All of those are degrees of understanding, if you know what you're looking at. Well, let's break it down. 1600, zeros are placeholders, so let's drop those. 6 plus 1 is? 7. What's the significance of the number 7? Islam, Sister Stephanie, right? What's the significance of the number 7? Say again? Perfection. 9 is completion.
9 is completion, 7 is perfection.
Yes, sir. 7 represents perfection, right? How many continents do you have?
7 continents.
How many chakras of the human body? 7. How many oceans do we have?
7.
Trick question. Only one ocean with 7 names. Don't ever fall for that again. Trick question. I just want to make sure y'all see if y'all was thinking, right? How many red stripes in the U.S. flag? 7. Why 7? Why just? Anytime you see the net, 7 is the signature of your forefathers, right? That's the way kind of like we sign a particular thing. When you get in spirituality, there's something known as the 7 Elohim, and the 7 Elohim are the 7 angels, right? But angels to us aren't spooks. Noble Drew Ali taught us. What is an angel? A thought. Man, what kind of flesh? Human flesh. So Noble Drew Ali cleared that up because messing with the European, what did we think an angel looked like? I grew up thinking that they were little, fat European babies with wings playing harps. I had that thought in my mind. When I heard the word angel, that's what I thought it was, right? But when you realize it's a human being, and then you go back and read Revelations and see what it's really saying, you could just say these are messengers doing human work around the planet. Islam. Real quick, that's also why preachers don't preach out of Revelations. But it's okay, we're gonna demonstrate it tonight though. Islam.
I was gonna say, isn't that someone that's a master of the angels?
So semantically, yes. And there's nothing wrong with that because when you get into the spiritualities of it, these ones are also, channeling creative spirits. You know what I'm saying? So, which are angles and energies of light. Angles mean something. There's a reason why we stand at the 45-degree angle on our prayer. You know what I'm saying? Everything means something. Like, if you ask, and just respectfully, because don't get it twisted, I was raised a Christian, okay? But just, what's the science behind getting on your knees and praying with your eyes closed and with your hands like this? Give me the science of it. Say again? Submission. Begging. What does the word pray mean in law? Because that's a legal term. Anybody know that? What is the, if you do a legal name change, the form that you put forth to the court, it says, I pray the judge that such and such. Doesn't mean that you're praying to the judge. The word pray means petition. That's what a prayer is. It's a petition. All right. Now, what's the methodology you use in your petition? Right. See, what was put on us that made us a subjugated people? Right. Everything that was done to us made us grovel. Right. I had a barbershop on Auburn Avenue at one point, and it was right across from Wheat Street Towers, which is a elder living facility. And I love talking to elders. I'm glad you're here. I want to ask you some questions tonight, elder. When I see the white hair, I just get happy. Again, we're winning because the white hair ones are in the room. All right. Never have an organization with a bunch of young people. You're going to lose. All right. So what happens is I would talk to the elders, and I'll bring the elders out. Just tell me something. Just sit at your feet. Let me learn something. And we'd be talking or whatever. And right down the street was the King Center, right? So there's a bunch of Europeans that come from all over the world to that King Center downtown, right? So one time I was talking to one of the elders, and we're on the sidewalk, and it was like maybe about 50 Europeans walking up on the sidewalk. And the elder, as he was talking to me, his energy got off when he seen the Europeans coming up. He got nervous, and he dropped his head, and he stepped off the sidewalk. And I knew what he was doing. I said, elder, respectfully, I said, come stand with me. So we don't have to do that no more. I got you. Just stand with me. We all right. You know what I'm saying? And we stood there and made them go around. Now you might have to take that on. I felt a little radical that day, right? I don't want to put that on your spirit. What I'm saying is it just perturbed me to see my elder still in that condition. So what did they do to him when he was younger to make him still feel that as a white-headed one? See, it meant something when you had the white hair back in the day in the Moorish and Islamic Empire. We used the term sheikh in Arabic, S-H-A-Y-K-H, which means elder, S-H-A-Y-K-H, right? Which in its anglicized form is the word sheik, right? S-H-E-I-K, same thing, and it means elder, right? Technically, in the ancient world, you didn't become a sheikh until you were, y'all ready for it? 52 years old, okay? Y'all seen this before? Y'all see this a lot. How many words in the preamble to your Constitution? Oh, but why is that? That's because your forefathers had something to do. Remember I told you about the signature. Islam? So when you talk about having your elders present, your elders can teach you what didn't work before, right? So this new thing that you're trying to do, yeah, I wouldn't do that. Sit down, boy. Let me tell you a story. You know how many times I've been told that? You know, that's the only reason I've made it to 47. I was a foolish young man, but I sat around a lot of elders. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, you have to get back to, I'm saying all this to say, you have to get back to your specific culture. Islam was? All right?